There was one Azov soldier from the Azov Brigade fighting in New York that told me, he was like, I'd actually much rather be fighting in Kursk than here in New York because it's like all the buildings, all the land that's being destroyed is Ukrainian. It'd be much better to be fighting inside of Russia itself so that the Russians are destroying their own homes, their own land, and destroying their own country.
American journalist David Kirichenko is from a Ukrainian family. He speaks the language, and throughout the war, he's reported from some of the most dangerous sectors of the front line. In December, he returned to eastern Ukraine, embedding with the Azov Brigade as they fought Russian troops around New York, a critical frontline town located just south of Toretsk. Russian forces seized it last summer, only for the Ukrainians to recapture it a few months later.
But they're also extremely motivated in terms of when you sit down and you talk to these young men about Ukrainian history or Ukrainian politics. They're very enthusiastic to break down like 1,000-year history of how this war came to be, Ukraine's and Russia's history, and the challenges that they were telling me about of that Trump will encounter when trying to negotiate with the Russians, because they don't see this war ending anytime soon, and it's going to continue on and on until the root causes of this war are solved, and they're not going to be solved by freezing the line or signing some sort of peace agreement. Putin, according to them, wants to destroy and subjugate all of Ukraine.
Azov had a controversial reputation with allegations of links to the far right. The brigade was banned from receiving US weaponry, an embargo that was only lifted last summer. But it also earned a fearsome reputation for its defence of the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol, and is now a formal unit within Ukraine's National Guard.
Being with the Azov Brigade, I thought one of the most interesting thing was the soldiers and commanders were so young. Some of the commanders that I was speaking to were like 22, 25. The guys there are very, very young. And a lot of them that I spoke to fought in Mariupol, were there in Azovstal. And so these are battle-hardened soldiers, but very young. It makes you stop and pause and think, like, these men have the experiences of a 40, 50-year-old commander in any given army, and here they are at 21, 22.
David also spent time with teams of Ukrainian combat medics, volunteers who work in some of the most dangerous parts of the front line.
Any sort of labeling on your vans or vehicles that designates it like as a Red Cross or humanitarian or medical, the Russians specifically tried to target them and hit them so that they can't rescue soldiers. And so if the Russians do see an ambulance or the medics, they will dedicate and send as many drones as they can to try to hit those evacs and medics and try to kill them.
New York is 50 miles east of Prokofsk, a logistics hub for the Ukrainian military and a highly strategic town that Russia wants to capture as part of its efforts to take the whole of the Donbas. Ukrainian troops still hold Prokofsk, but it's under constant bombardment, with Russian forces trying to encircle it and force a Ukrainian retreat, as happened in Avdiivka a year ago.
If the Russians were to try to take Pokrovsk head on, the Ukrainians are ready for it, and it'd be very, very difficult for the Russians, and it'd be a very bloody battle. But I think the Russians are trying to avoid that, and they're taking the villages on the flanks of Pokrovsk, and they're trying to encircle it, which has been quite successful since the summer of 2024 when they were making their advances towards Pokrovsk.
So what about Donald Trump? What are Ukrainian troops feeling about his arrival and the effect that might have on any peace negotiations?
A few things. I think one, there was a bit more optimism and hope in terms of Trump coming to power. Say Trump is offended or very upset at what Russia does, and Russia doesn't care to negotiate. And then there was a feeling that, like, well, Trump might just decide of like, screw it, let's just give them Tomahawk missiles, or like let the Ukrainians start bombing Moscow for all I care. And so seemed like there was greater maneuverability with Trump.
David says many of the troops he met see Donald Trump as a better match for Vladimir Putin than Joe Biden. Whether that's true will become clearer in the coming weeks and months as the new administration's policy on Ukraine emerges. But whatever that strategy is, the men and women David encountered, many of them very young, remain motivated. Their desire to fight on, undiminished. Simon Newton, BFBS Forces News. Thanks for watching. For more from BFBS Forces News, like and subscribe to our channel.